Trialogues are a way of setting up conversational spaces amongst teams or groups that helps individuals and then the people that they work with understand themselves better. Trialogues come from postmodern philosophy, and what postmodernism tells us is that the way that we understand ourselves in the world comes from the way that we co-create narratives, internally or with other people. So by using trialogues, we are giving our teams and groups the opportunity to create a new dialogue that is perhaps more preferred, more optimal, helps them perform better. Whatever it happens to be, trialogues is a way of creating openings and opportunities. So the hope of a trialogue is that you're getting folks to share their experiences, their internalized narratives, with others who can give feedback on that narrative. And by doing the feedback and listening process, we're actually creating new narratives amongst the team or the individual that then allow for change to happen, or for the team or the individual to do things differently. I've always preferred groups of 4, especially because this way of conversing with other people can be kind of uncomfortable for groups at first. And so having 4 people sort of shares the conversational load. And the idea is that it can be randomized. You can be very intentional about who you put in a group together, totally up to you. I often start my trialogues with some kind of journal prompt, some kind of reflection that I want each individual to think about before the trialogue itself starts. So maybe the team is working on things like communication. I might give a couple of prompts for folks to write on, how they see themselves contributing or not to communication amongst the team. I may also ask them to think about the ways that they see the team communicating or not. When I set this up with teams, I tell them that in the journal prompt, individually be as honest as possible, because you're not going to have to share that with anybody unless you want to. Once everybody has finished their journal prompts, that's when they actually go into the trialogues. So they sit in little circles of 3 or 4 amongst the room that we're in. And then I explain the way we're going to have the conversation around what they wrote in the journal prompt. And that's a very intentional conversation. And it's very important that you set up the structure and have them stick to it. So the way that it works is that the first person to go is the speaker. The speaker will have 2, 3, 4 minutes to share what they wrote in their journal. And that I tell them, you can share what you want. So maybe you don't share everything you wrote, but I do encourage them to go 1 to 5% more than they might be comfortable with, just as an exercise of vulnerability and risk-taking, and a way of really sharing their inner experiences with the other people in their trialogue. Once that speaker shares, it then flips to the audience. And the audience is then going to have a conversation about what they heard the speaker say, as if the speaker wasn't there. Now, keep in mind, the speaker is there. They are hearing the conversation that their teammates are having about them, but it's really important that they're not allowed to interrupt or ask questions, because there's something about creating a space in this way that the speaker and the audience can dialogue differently. They understand themselves differently. They hear different things they've never heard of before. That's what helps them create maybe a new narrative for themselves, and then create change and do things differently when the team then goes back to practice or the next competition. So when the audience is talking about what they heard the speaker say, we really want this to be strengths-based and reflective. We are not looking for the audience to offer solutions to the speaker, to fix things, to provide commentary. Instead, what we want to encourage the audience to do is reflect on, what did they hear the speaker say? Are there struggles they didn't know that was going on for the speaker? Could they provide feedback to the speaker, maybe around things like, wow, that's really surprising for me to hear them say that, because I've always experienced them as a good communicator. Once the audience is done, the speaker always gets the last word. That's just a 1-minute kind of summary and closing, because the speaker is the one that just had their experiences shared in the trialogue. And that can be really vulnerable and anxiety inducing. So we want to give them an opportunity to kind of close things up. After that, the speaker then joins the audience, and audience goes into their role as the speaker. And all members of the trialogue then have an opportunity to follow that format. I have trialogues going on at the same time in a room, and I just generally walk around, help to keep time. I'm listening in on trialogues, trying to see if there's maybe a theme amongst trialogues, a theme amongst people, just any kind of general patterns you might be noticing in your role as the facilitator. Once everyone completes their trialogue, I usually like to spend at least 10 minutes as an entire team or group debriefing. So I have everybody sit in a big circle, and then I just have them share their reactions, not telling what their teammates shared, but their personal takeaways, ways that they got new insights or reflections with the big group. And what's important about this as well, I always stand outside of the big group and I make them talk to each other. That's another way of deepening the conversational space and making sure they connect with one another. That creates trust, creates better understanding. It definitely helps cohesion and team bonding. And it's a unique way of getting at different problems that we would normally conceptualize as, well, let's do an intervention. Let's go over effective communication skills. While those can be important, what trialogues offer us is a new way of creating conversational spaces to empower the clients or the athletes to make that change themselves, rather than it coming from me as the facilitator.